All right, we are talking about volume today. We are on chapter 12, lesson 11, which is on page 402 and 403 in your math book. So when we look at volume, volume is the volume of a solid figure is its cubic measure or the number of cubic units it contains. And so we are going to have three numbers when we talk about volume. We're going to be talking about three numbers today that we're going to be multiplying together to figure out the volume. So if we just look at the formula for volume, the formula is length times width times height. There's three numbers on every single one with volume, and it is length times width times height. So you'll be multiplying three different numbers today. When you look at how you would write it out, you would do the cursive L times W times H. Volume equals length times width times height. So let's take a look at this cube first here that we've got. And you can see in our cube, we have 6 centimeters here, 3 centimeters here, 5 centimeters. So length is 6, width is 3, height 5. So if we look at our formula over here, length times width times height, we're just going to plug in those numbers. Length 6, width 3, height 5. So we need to make sure we multiply 6 times 3 and then 18 times 5, or however you want to do it. 3 times 5 is 15 times 6, whatever makes you happy. And either way, you're going to multiply those three numbers together. We would get 90 centimeters cubed. Now, on volume, it's always cubed. We talked about area being squared. Perimeter was just a regular label. We didn't add anything to it. Remember when we talked about the perimeter, the outside edge, the fence in your yard, the out of bounds line on the basketball court, the border that goes around a room, things like that. Perimeter, no label. Area, that inside space when you're gonna maybe lay down a carpet or put down floor, something like that, we had to square that. That always was squared. When we talk about volume, you're multiplying three numbers. This one's cubed, so every single label would be cubed. Would be a small 3, which is cubed. So when you just have three regular numbers, 6 times 3 times 5, you multiply them together, you get 90. Now, you're going to have some fractions today, so I want to take a look at a fraction example as well. When we look at this one, we have a length of 4.5, a width of 3.5, and a height of 2. So the formula is going to be the same. We're going to have length times width times height. Same formula. V equals length times width times height. Now, we're just going to plug in those numbers. 4.5 times 3.5 times 2. And I know when I multiply fractions, we have to take those mixed numbers and make them into improper fractions. Remember, we have to multiply the denominator times the whole number and add it to the numerator. So for instance, 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, so that would be 9 over 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, 7 over 2. And we know anytime we have a whole number, we have to put the whole number over 1. So if we take a look at that, we have 9 over 2, 7 over 2, 2 over 1. Now, cross-reducing, I just want to point this out to you. We didn't really talk about this very much when we talked about cross-reducing. I cross-reduced this 2 and this 2 to get rid of those. So I cross-reduced, took out that 2, made it a 1, took out that 2, made it a 1. When you have three numbers like this, you can actually cross-reduce. I could have done this 2 and this 2. I could have gone all the way across. Now look, they're still in that same bottom to top, denominator to numerator. I couldn't do side by side. I can still only do it in that same. But I can pretend like that one's not there and actually cross-reduce across the board. I just did them next door though because it was more convenient. Now, there's nothing to cross-reduce with this 2 because I've turned these into 1s. So I'm going to leave that the same. So I've got 9 times 7 on the top, which I know is 63. I've got 2 times 1 on the bottom. So I'm going to have 63 over 2. Well, I can't leave it improper, so I need to do inside-outside. So if we take a look at my inside-outside here, 2 can go into 6 3 times, multiply those, subtract, bring down. 3 can go into or 2 can go into 3 one time, subtract, I had this remainder. So I know I have 31, whole number, numerator, denominator. So the volume of this one, 31.5 inches cubed. So when you're multiplying fractions today, you just have to remember we need to turn them into improper fractions. If you have a whole number, it always goes over 1, and you need to cross reduce. Okay, you need to make sure you cross reduce those. All right, let's take a look at a couple whiteboard examples, and then we'll go through your homework. So in your book, if you take a look at, if you just take a look, let's just take a look at number 1 and 2. They're just showing you cubes, and they want you to figure out the length and the width and the height of those. So you would have to count across. So if we look at number 1 in your book, if you look at number 1, you would count the length, and that's across the front. So 1, 2, 3, so there's 5. So the length would be 5. The width, remember, is kind of that side number, 2, and the height on that one would be 3. So you would multiply 5 times 2 times 3. So you would have 5 times 2 is 10, times 3 is 30. Same thing, they just didn't provide the numbers for you. 1, 2, and 3 are like that on your assignment today, but I'm going to go through those numbers with you to make sure you have them. All right, so I'm going to do another one that has fractions in it for you. So we have one more with fractions to practice because I think the regular multiplying is not quite as hard for you. So I'm going to draw my cube here, or whatever. I'll do a rectangular prism. Okay. So if we take a look at this one, I've got, not the prettiest, but it's okay, cube here, rectangular prism here. And I know that I'm going to be looking for volume. So the first thing I'm going to do is write V equals length times width times height. First thing I do. Then all I need to do is plug in my numbers. V equals my length. So I'm going to put a 3.5 there. Times my width. Right here it is, 2.5. Times, then I'm just going to plug in the height. There it is, 4. Times 4. Now, I know I can't leave them as whole or mixed numbers, so I'm going to make them into improper fractions. So I have V equals 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7 over 2 times 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5 over 2 times, and then I have 4 over 1. Everything's got to go over 1 there. All right, now when I take a look at this, when I take a look at these, I'm going to look for cross-reducing. Now remember I told you you could cross-reduce from here to here and just pretend like that's not there, but since we can cross-reduce next door neighbors, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn this into a 1, and I'm going to turn this into a 2. That's all I can cross-reduce. I don't see anything else I can do. So I'm left with, I'm going to do this one first. 5 times 2 is 10, and then 10 times 7, because it's easier for me to multiply that way. So I know that that's going to be 70. I could have done 7 times 5 is 35, 35 times 2, 70. It's the same answer. We know that commutative property, order doesn't matter. You're going to get the same answer. 2 times 1 is going to equal 2. Well, it's an improper fraction. I can't leave it that way. So I'm going to do inside, outside. So I'm going to have 70 on the inside and 2 on the outside. 2 can go into 7 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. I'm going to subtract, bring down. 2 can go into 10 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10. No remainder on this one. So I know V equals 35 meters. Now, normally you would write the little number 3, but on your assignment, I'm going to have you just write out the word cubed, because we do have them, but they're hard to find in your computer. So we're just going to write out the word cubed instead of that little number 3. So on volume, all you're doing is multiplying length times width times height. Let's take a look at your homework today. 1, 2, and 3, they didn't put numbers on there, they just gave you pictures, but I went ahead and wrote the numbers out for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a 4. 1, 2, sorry about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 2 right there, so that'll be a 2 right there. So you have a 4 for the length, 2 for the width, 4 for the height. Next one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 for your length, 3 for your width. I wrote the length at the top and bottom, and that's confusing, sorry. And then 1, 2, 3 for your height, 3 for your width. On the last one, we have 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So you can just plug those numbers in, and those will be the numbers that you multiply, just those 3 numbers. 4, 5, and 6, you're doing the same thing. You're multiplying the 3 numbers that are given. Those are all whole numbers, so that should be pretty easy on 1 through 6. When we get down to the bottom here, 7 through 11, you're doing the same exact thing. The only difference is they didn't give you a picture. All they did was give you numbers, so it's not that, there's no difference here. On number 7, I see 3 fractions, so you're going to have to make all 3 of those improper fractions. If you can cross-reduce, guys, cross-reduce. If you can't, I can see a cross-reduce already. So cross-reduce, label squared. You're just going to multiply these 3 numbers. The rest of them are all whole numbers. This is the only fraction one you have today. So when you multiply these, just make sure you have a label cubed.